Welcome to our video presentation. My name is Carlos Alvarez, and with my classmate Valentina Ponce, shall present to you our L2 writing model presentation. First, we shall do a brief overview of the model that we chose to base our model on. Followed by this, we shall perform a complete overview of our L2-Adapted model, and we shall break down the individual components that we may have added. And finally, we shall present to you some observations regarding our model and a conclusion of sorts that rounds up our view of our model.
We decided to work with the Scar-D'Amalia and Berater's knowledge transforming model as a base model to adapt for L2 writing. This model is originally thought for an expert L1 writer, as unlike in the knowledge-telling model, it involves a more thoughtful process in which the L1 writer selects from their content knowledge what specific content they shall use to solve the content problem space and properly translate and write the text at hand.
Our reason to choose this specific model over the two other models available lies in the knowledge transforming model's premeditation, in the sense that in this model, the writer selects what content to use, and what discourse knowledge to use, which we consider to be also part of the process of an L2 writer's writing process. We also took into account the model's recursiveness and the presence of metacognition, which can be relevant to L2 students as they review the text to be able to perform acts of self-repair and therefore hopefully avoid the fossilization of mistakes for their future use.
First, writers do a mental representation of the assignment. They read the task and think what they must do. Then they analyze the rhetorical problem and do a series of mental questions such as what is my purpose, who is my audience, and what is the exigence of the task? All these questions to self-set goals. The model represents the balance of what the writers know about the topic, the content knowledge, and what they know about the genre, the discourse knowledge. These are both ultimately affected by our L2 filter component, which acts as a filter for what content or discourse knowledge can be properly translated in accordance to each writer's concrete knowledge of an L2, while what they know about the genre is also affected by their background, which often influences how they approach the genre. The two problem spaces, content and rhetorical, are dialectic. This means, on the one hand, writers are aware of the topic. They select what information is relevant, but also they must respond to a rhetorical problem, not only knowing about the topic itself, but also knowing how to write about the topic. And being aware of the exigencies, the audience, and aims. These two processes must be equilibrated. They cannot put all the information in the text as an obvious writer does, but neither should they forget the rhetorical factors.
Here you can see our model in which we have made a couple of concrete changes. In the first place, as Valentina mentioned, we added a component titled the L2 filter, which symbolizes the writer's L2 knowledge. And secondly, we have added a component titled background component, which symbolizes the writer's background. We also removed one of the two problem translation boxes, but this is only for aesthetic reasons. And as you can see, if you zoom into our model, you can see the arrows representing both the original bidirectionality of these two components and the dialectical relationship between the both content spaces represented. And now we will do a breakdown of both the L2 filter and the background component.
Our reasoning for adding the L2 filter element lies in the concrete fact that less advanced L2 users logically would not be able to produce as sophisticated text as advanced L2 users. Therefore, we can assume that regardless of how much content knowledge a specific writer has, it will be necessarily limited by their effective L2 knowledge. In this sense, a writer with a lower L2 level could have trouble finding grammatical forms or the correct vocabulary to translate their content knowledge in an effective manner, while a writer with a higher L2 level could use their superior knowledge to write a more clear, concise, and eloquent text.
To understand our reasoning for including a background element to our model, first it is important to clear up what do we actually mean by background. When we refer to the writer's background, we refer to the same component elements that Matsuda, these being the writer's first language, their L1, their culture, and their education. In the case of education, Matsuda refers to the writer's educational system. So, for example, the Chilean educational system. But when it comes to the definition of culture, we prefer to use the definition that Highland uses, which is, and I quote, a historically transmitted and systematic network of meanings which allow us to understand, develop, and communicate our knowledge and beliefs about the world. The relevance of the writer's background lies in that it may affect the style or the way in that they write. Although this doesn't necessarily allow us to predict how they will write, as it is not something definitive, or as Highland puts it, L2 students cannot be lumped together as an undifferentiated group, nor should cultural norms be regarded as decisive.
We can highlight that our model counts with several cognitive and composing processes. We can posit that when it concerns composing, our model takes into account the processes of planning, translating, and reviewing. This is because we consider that an L2 writer does effectively plan what they shall write before they actually translate, to then review and correct it if it's necessary. These processes may be repeated, which reaffirms our assumption that our model is in fact recursive. When it relates to cognitive processes, we can affirm the presence of metacognition, memory, specifically long-term memory, and problem solving. Metacognition can be detected in composing processes, such as reviewing. Memory is vital to this model as both content discourse and L2 knowledge are all stored in one's long-term memory. Problem solving is also innate to our model as it is represented both in problem spaces as well as in the analysis of the problem in itself. All of these components lead to the process of solving the problem and therefore to the process of actually writing a text.
We can posit that our model is a top-down one, as the most important element is more than the text itself, is the content, the knowledge inside the writer's brain. And as a conclusion, we can affirm that our model of knowledge transforming applied to L2 writers is a simple yet effective way to understand how a serious L2 writer would go about the process of writing a piece of text. We also firmly believe that we have generated both a psychologically plausible and parsimonious model, as it is rooted in previously selected and studied academic texts such as Highland and Matsuda, and it more importantly describes how a real L2 learner would go about a writing activity, such as, for example, writing an essay. Thank you very much for your time.